I carried an HT every single day for an entire year. And here's what I found out.
Stick around and we'll get right to it.
Real quick, before we get going, I've got to give a shout out to these guys. They're my latest patrons over on Patreon. If you'd like to help support the channel, I'll leave a link to Patreon down in the description below. Hey, welcome back, guys. Last October, right around the very beginning of the month, I committed to carrying an HT every single day for an entire year, which meant if I left the house, I had to carry an HT with me. Now, I had, I think, 7 different HTs in the rotation, and it would always depend on what I was doing, how long I was going to be gone, and what capabilities I needed that really dictated which one of those HTs I actually carried with me. I will tell you that as the year progressed, 2 of those I think fell out of the rotation, and I added one to the rotation roughly around February. So what I wanted to do today is kind of take a walk through those radios, tell you what I liked about it and what I didn't like about it, and then tell you kind of which ones I carried the most. It wasn't any single radio because it always depended on what I needed for that particular day. First up in the list is the Yaesu FT65. Great little radio, great little budget radio, and a big step up from a Baofeng. This is one of my favorite inexpensive radios. However, it is one of the radios that fell out of the rotation. While it is a fabulous radio, I just had others in my collection that I preferred. One of the key things for me that's missing on the FT65 is the ability to charge it directly into the radio from 12 volts or from USB-C. Now, you can take the cradle with you, and if you set the radio in the cradle, you can then plug up the cradle to a 12-volt source and directly charge this radio from 12 volts. But having to carry that cradle with me is just one extra thing that I didn't want to have with me. Also, this is not really a true dual band receive radio. You can kind of accomplish that with a radio, but it's not quite the same as something like the FT5. So that was another reason that this one kind of fell out of the rotation. I still love this radio. Primarily now I use it in my portable digipeater kit, so that's kind of where this one lives. The second one that I have out on a long-term loan. But if you're looking for a good budget name brand radio, definitely check out the FT65. Next up is the Rivus R89. This is by far, hands down, my favorite Chinese radio. This thing puts out 10 watts. It's IP67 or 68 rated. I can't remember which. But I did submerge this thing during the initial video test of this radio. I submerged it for 10 minutes in a bucket of water, and I've had 0 issues out of it. The battery lasts forever, and it's USB-C rechargeable right on the back of the radio. Now, I'm not quite as big of a fan of USB-C recharging as a lot of the other guys that you'll see on YouTube. It does have its benefits sometimes. More often than not, I prefer a radio that can just charge from 12 volts because, well, all of our batteries that we carry into the field are 12 volts. And when I can plug straight from the battery into a radio without having to do any conversion of voltages, well, that's my preference. There are times, and we'll discuss this in a future video, where USB-C will definitely win out over that 12-volt recharging. But a great little radio to have in your kit. I think these things are only like 50, maybe 55 bucks as of the time of this recording. A fabulous radio, and it stayed in the rotation for the entire year. As long as I didn't need APRS capabilities that day, because of the battery life, I absolutely loved this radio. Next up is the Yaesu VX6. I really don't have anything negative to say about this radio. It's all positive. This is absolutely a fabulous radio, assuming you don't need APRS capabilities. It is very small in size. It runs forever on the battery. It's submersible. It's just a great radio. I guess if I had to point out a couple of negative things, it is on kind of the expensive side. These retail for roughly around $250. The only other thing that I'm not crazy about with this radio, I understand why it's got to be this way, but I'm just not crazy about it, is the screw-in protector right here where the microphone would plug into. That's just a little bit aggravating when you're working with a digi-rig to try to get it threaded down into that hole, especially if you've got these B and C adapters on here, because as you maybe can see, those two items sit pretty close together. The good old FT5 was definitely in my rotation the entire year. I have loved this radio. Well, most of the things about this radio. It's a great APRS radio, and it's fairly reasonable priced considering the capabilities you get with this radio. If there's a negative with this radio, it's trying to send an APRS message. There's just the GUI interface is not great on this, and sending especially a lengthy APRS message is a bit frustrating. But part of that's just because we're limited to the small screen and using the touchscreen on this radio. This one definitely will continue to be in my rotation going forward. You can recharge this one with a 12-volt barrel jack connector right on the side, so I can connect this direct to a battery and be able to recharge it on the go. Something else I have found for this radio is this aftermarket battery. Let's see if we can get that to focus there. That's the one by W0AEZ. This little battery will give you a full 24 hours of runtime, even when you're beaconing APRS. The other thing it gives you is it does have USB-C. Let's see again, can we focus? It's got a USB-C port right there on the bottom of that battery so that you can recharge it by USB-C if that's something you prefer. You can also keep this on the radio and charge using that 12-volt port right on the side. So if you use that aftermarket battery, there's multiple ways to recharge this radio. The FT70. This is a radio I really wanted to like. I like the price point of this radio. I like that it's got Yaesu's digital built into it. But there's so many other things that I just can't like about this radio. On a positive note, we can charge it with the barrel connector right on the side of the radio from a 12-volt source, so that's definitely a plus. However, I just don't like the interface of this radio. It's lacking APRS, and I just found that I wasn't grabbing it very often. After probably May, which would be April or May, which would be about 5 or 6 months into this project, I just stopped carrying this one altogether. So I'm going to say that the FT70 fell out of the rotation about halfway through because it just wasn't my favorite amongst the radios that I'm carrying. Now, something to note on the FT70, and this even applies to the FT5 that we were just talking about, these have a parasitic draw. So if you charge this battery fully and then you just set it on the shelf and don't touch it for a year, if you come back and try to power that radio on, the battery is going to be dead. That's just one of the drawbacks of several of the Yaesu radios, the FT70 and the FT5 specifically. So if you're going to store them long term, make sure you take the battery off so it doesn't run it dead when it's just sitting there doing nothing. And guys, that's with it turned off. It still drains that battery over a period of time. Talk about a high quality classic radio. The Yaesu FT60 is a fabulous radio. I don't have a lot of negative things to say about this particular radio. I just recently did a Mars mod to this radio, opening up the transmit frequencies. And now this one has actually fell out of the rotation. I probably stopped carrying this about 9 months into this experiment. I'm going to rededicate this radio to my wife's vehicle. Now that it's Mars modded, it could be used on GMRS frequencies if we absolutely needed to. And since we have a GMRS license, that will be a fairly good solution for her. The only reason I really quit carrying this is it is only a single band receive radio, and well, I've got so many HTs in the lineup that I kind of prefer some of the others. So fabulous radio, pretty decent price on these. These things are built like a tank. However, it's just not the radio that I ultimately chose as kind of when I started to kind of narrow things down to my absolute favorites. Excluding the price and the battery life, the D75 is in my top choice of radios. I absolutely love this radio. I love everything about it. APRS capable. I can access the TNC inside over Bluetooth. I can access it over a wired connection. The APRS interface is hands down light years beyond what Yaesu has done in the FT5. The only time I found that I would not grab this radio is if I needed to carry one HT with one battery and get through an entire day. Now, if I turned off APRS and the GPS and the Bluetooth, yeah, I could probably go all day with this. But I'm not going to take this radio out if I need all day battery life. If I grab this one, I want to be using those APRS features and the TNC features. But this one came around a little bit after I began this project, but this one definitely stayed in the rotation the entire time that I owned it. Now, out of all of the options, which are my favorite three? On the budget side, I'm going with the Rivus R89. Again, a fabulous radio, 10 watts, waterproof, and if I destroy this thing, I'm only out about $50 or $55. It's definitely light years beyond the Baofeng UV5R. It's just a much better constructed radio. The battery will last me forever. So budget option, I'm going with the RA89. If we're looking at something in the mid-tier range, I'm going with the VX6. This thing is an absolute battle tank. Again, submersible radio, and it's got great Japanese build quality. So if you've got a little bit more budget, I would definitely recommend the VX6. For a top-of-the-line radio, though, I'm definitely going with the Kenwood D75. Is it going to be as rugged as one of the other two radios? Yeah, probably not. I would definitely not want this thing submerged in a bucket of water. You're not going to see that anytime soon on the channel, but they don't claim that it's waterproof. They do claim that it is a fabulous APRS radio with an accessible TNC, and when I need those features, this is going to be my go-to radio. If you found today's information helpful, be sure to give us a thumbs up before you head off. We will see you guys on the next one. Until then, 7-3.